Hey, and welcome to this tutorial on After Effects. We're going to look at 4 things today. First thing we're going to take a look at is creating an alpha channel. Now, we're not going to necessarily do that in After Effects, but we are going to use the alpha channel, and we're going to need that information in After Effects so that we can composite this image right here on top of other images. We're also going to look at anchor point and how to adjust the anchor point and work with that, and also parenting and some rotation. So in this image right here, what we have is this city, and the background of it is completely white, and that's an issue because if we want to lay this image on top of another image, then we're going to be stuck with this white background. So what we need to do in Photoshop is get rid of this white background. Now, usually what I'll do, just to take care of this pretty quickly, is I'll bring this into Photoshop here, and I will go to my quick selection tool or the magic wand, and for this one I'm just going to grab the magic wand tool and come into the white area and click one time. And what you'll see is Photoshop has now selected this entire white area. Now I have contiguous on right there so that it is not grabbing all of the white, it's just grabbing this area out here. These black outlines are keeping Photoshop from selecting inside of the image. So if there was an opening somewhere in this graphic, then what we'd end up doing, and I think there's a little bit over here, but I'm going to let that go, it would end up selecting all of the white, and I don't want that. So this is working the way I want it to work. And next thing we need to do is just hit the delete key, and the white is now gone, and this is set up for us to composite this image on top of another one. I'm just going to get my selection tool, Command D, to get rid of my dancing ants there, and we're going to save this. And there's 2 ways to save this. One would be as a PNG, the other would be as a Photoshop file. This is already a PNG layer or image, so I'm just going to hit Command S to save this, and it's going to update the image. And now what it has done is recorded this alpha channel, this area out here. It's told this file is going to tell After Effects that there's nothing there. We have our bounding box, you can see, but all of this other area is going to be empty. All right, so let's jump over into After Effects. I need to start a new composition. I'm going to go to Composition, New Composition, and for this one I'm just going to set up a 1280 by 720, 24 frames, 10 seconds long. Hit OK on that, and I'm going to import those files now. And I don't know if I clearly mentioned it, but when you save an alpha channel, it needs to be a PNG file or a Photoshop file, a PSD file. Both of those file types, you can see these are PNGs, will recognize the alpha channel information. So I'm going to select these 3 images, hit open, and we're going to go from there. So we're going to look at the first one, Comic City. You can see now, I'm going to double click on that. And we have a black background in there, but don't worry, we can select the transparency grid, and you can see now that we have that transparency in there. And so that image is ready to go, and it's 4000 by 3000. That's the resolution of the image, so that's pretty large, and that's going to be fine because we can scale things down here in After Effects. The next image is the Creative Burst, and then also the Grunge Shields, which this is a sign. This is a little sign. Double click on that, bring that up, and bring down. We'll go ahead and fit that. So you can see there that this image also has alpha channel information, so it's ready to composite on top of something else. So let's start building this graphic. The first thing I want to bring in is the Creative Burst. I'm going to drag that down into our timeline, and I'm going to scale this down. Well, no, actually I'm going to leave this. Oh, let's see. I'm going to scale this down just a little bit. What I want to do is find those bounding boxes, and I'm going to, I've got scale. I have S for scale. I'm going to shift click R and bring up my rotation also, and I'm going to rotate this, and that's what I wanted to look for right there, those edges, these corners. I want to scale this up just enough to cover that. So right there we have it, and it's going to, when we rotate completely around, we won't break into the image there. All right, so that works great. I'm going to set that back to 0. And as you can tell, I was rotating that image. And one thing that I want to point out, because we are looking at anchor point today, is the anchor point of this image, of this spiral here, is dead center. And the person that created this graphic knew what they were doing. They made sure that that anchor point was dead center, and that's the way we want it. So when we rotate this, it rotates dead center and not off center of this spiral. So there's our anchor point. So I want to look at rotation now. You can see here in the rotation properties, we have a 0x plus 0.0 degrees. And these two numbers can be animated separately, or not necessarily separately, but they mean two different things. This 0x means the number of full rotations. So in a rotation, there's 360 degrees, which is what is represented by this next number, the 0.0 degrees. It starts off at 0 and it'll go to 359 and then start over. And when we get to 359 and go to 360, you can see that the first number jumps up to 1x. So that means a full rotation has been accomplished. I'm going to set that back to 0. And all I need to do for this animation is I just want, in this 10 seconds, I want this burst back here to rotate one full time. And the way that I'm going to do that is set my first keyframe at 0. And I'm going to go to the back end of the composition timeline here. And I'm just going to click on the 0x, and now I'm going to type in 1 and hit return. It doesn't look like anything has happened, but that thing rotated one full time. So we'll go back to the beginning. We have our two keyframes, and we'll see what this looks like. The nice thing about this is now when we get to the end, it's going to do one full rotation, and it's going to loop, and it's going to look perfect, and it'll just keep on looping like that. So this can be an animation that can continue to loop. All right, so we've looked at rotation, we've looked at the anchor point and how the anchor point determines where this is going to rotate. Let's go ahead and continue to build this animation. What I want to do next is let's just fade this in at the beginning. And I want this animation to happen pretty quick. So to fade this in, I'm going to go to opacity, hit T on the keyboard. And I'm going to set that first keyframe there with the stopwatch. I'm just going to go in 12 frames, half a second, and set my next keyframe. You know what I didn't do is I didn't drag my opacity down at the beginning keyframe, so let's drag that down, that first keyframe down to 0, and our second keyframe is set at 100%, so we can fade that up. So that fades in nicely. And now let's continue to build the animation. So the next thing I want to do is I want to bring in the comic city. I'm going to drag that down. I'm going to put it on top of the creative burst there, and we have that in there. S on the keyboard for scale. I'm going to drag that down to so that I can see the entire city. And if you'll notice, where did this scale? It scaled on the anchor point right there. And that's not really the way I want it to scale. That would work, but the way that this image is built, it looks like it's already popping up from this area right here, that the whole city's kind of popping up from right there. So that's what I want it to do in the animation. I'm going to work with this graphic. And to move this anchor point so that it scales down here, there are two ways of doing this. The first is to go to the anchor point on the layer, and I can begin to scrub these numbers to get that in place. And that works. It works fine. A lot of people get thrown off because that starts moving the image, and that's fine because we can reposition it. Using the position key, we can reposition it. So I've got that anchor point right there where I want it. So that is one way of doing it. I'm going to bring up the scale, Shift S for scale, and you can see now that that is where that anchor point position right there is where it scales from, and that's what I want. All right, I'm going to undo all of that so I can show you the other way of moving this anchor point, which is a little bit easier, a little bit quicker. So we've got the anchor point right there. I'm going to come up here to the pan behind tool, and it's also the anchor point tool. I'm going to click on that, come down here with that tool now, and grab that anchor point and pull it into position. And the image stays where it is. Don't have to worry about it moving around. I bring that anchor point into position, drop it there, and now when I scale, of course, it's going to do the exact same thing. So that's what we want. I'm going to go ahead and scale this image up and get my selection tool here and drag it kind of down into place. I'm going to go forward a little bit in my timeline so I can see the background. I want to scale this up a little bit more because what I want it to do is I want it to fill up this bottom area down here. Let's see, we'll drag that on down, about like that. Okay, that looks good. And I'm going to animate this in by, of course, using the scale property. So I'm going to start in here around 12 frames because at that point my background is fully opaque. And I'm going to set my first scale keyframe there. And remember that I'm at 60%. Click on that, bring it down to 0 so that it's completely out. And then I'm going to drag this up to 1 second and bring that back up to 60% to set that second keyframe at 60%. So now this image is going to scale up. All right, so we have adjusted the anchor point. We've scaled from that anchor point, and our city is popping into the scene with our burst back there rotating. All right, so let's go on and add a little bit more to this. We're going to bring the grunge shields in, which is a sign. I'm going to drop that on top of everything, and that one's definitely larger, so we're going to need to select S on the keyboard for scale, and let's scale that down a good bit. Bring that down, and we're going to drag into our timeline a little bit so we can see everything. And want to reposition this. We're going to need to bring that down probably about to 18% to fit in there nicely. And reposition it because I want it to be about right here at the top. And fill in this little spot in between the buildings. Fill that area in nicely. And we're going to animate this. We're going to have it drop from the top. Drop it in right down there. So we need to go to position on this. Hit P on the keyboard. And let's go in to 1 second. And we're going to set that first keyframe on position there. And let's go ahead and scrub that up. Let's remember that we're at 254 on the Y position there, XY. So the 254, let's remember that number. We're going to scrub this on up out of the image. And let's go about a second and a half, 112 there. And then let's bring that back down. We can just type that in, 254. Put it back into its position, and now we have that animated in. Let's take a look at that. All right, so everything's moving pretty nicely. Next thing we want to do is we've got our sign there, but we have no text in it. So let's add some text real quick. So let's get our text tool. Just type in here. I'm going to put in grunge city. And get my selection tool and move this around. Going to need to adjust the size of that just a little bit. Bring that down just a little bit to get that to fit in there better. And make sure I'm kind of centered up just in there nicely. That works. And what we want to do is we want to animate this text layer coming in also. A number of ways we could do that. What I want it to do is I want it to look like the sign is completely together, that the text and the sign are together. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a method called parenting. And the animation is already created in the sign here on layer 2, grunge shield. That animation is already created. You can see we have the position information right there. So to do this quickly, now I know my explanation is going to take a couple of minutes, but I could have already had this text animated by using parenting. And the way that parenting works is you have a parent and you have the child or children. You can have multiple layers that follow a parent. So the children layers, the child layers are what will follow the parent. In this example, the sign, this grunge shields layer 2 is going to be the parent and the child is going to be the text. So rather than going in here and trying to time this out to match up perfectly with the movement of the sign there, I'm just going to parent this grunge city to the grunge shields. The way we do that is we have this column right here, and you can see that it says parent. There's two options, two ways of doing this. Both of them are pretty easy. I can come to the drop down menu and I can select layer 2. So this is the Grunge City, and that's why I'm on that layer, is going to be the child, and the parent is going to be the Grunge Shields. I'm going to select that layer 2, and now we've parented. So this text layer is going to follow the sign in the animation. So that's one way of doing it. Go back to none. The second way is pretty easy also, the pick whip. You just grab the pick whip from the child and you drag it, and once you see that you're highlighted right there on the parent, just let go, and you can see again that we have parented to this sign. You can do that with multiple layers if you want to. So let's see what the animation does now. And the text follows right along with the sign. You can see that we didn't have to set any keyframes whatsoever. And if we go to scroll open this text layer and look at the transform properties, on the position there are no keyframes because it is taking the information from this position here on the sign. So that's parenting, and you can set up again one parent with multiple children. So if you want one layer to be the parent and a number of other layers to follow, that is an easy way. You don't have to go in and set a bunch of keyframes on all of the other layers. You can just have them follow the parent. All right, so let's look at what we've done so far on this animation. We have brought in the starburst and set it up rotating one time, and it loops in the background. We've also adjusted the anchor point of the city and scaled up on that anchor point that we've adjusted. We've also brought in the sign here and used parenting to bring in the text along with the sign. So that's a pretty quick animation, works really well, looks really nice. The last thing I want us to look at is easy ease. These two animations, the buildings and the sign, all come in and stop abruptly. What I want them to do is ease in. It's about like you coming to a stop sign in your car. You don't stop abruptly, you slow down and you ease into that stop. These animations right now are coming to an abrupt stop. So I'm going to select both of these layers and I'm going to hit the U key on the keyboard, and what that's going to show me is any keyframes that I have for these two layers. Now the reason I did that is one is animated on the position and the other is animated on the scale. And what I want to do is I want to ease. I'm not concerned about the beginning because they both begin off screen, so we're not going to see the beginning of these animations, but the end of the animation I want to ease into those. The way we're going to apply this easy ease is to go to the last keyframe here, the second keyframe that ends our animation. And one way we can get to it is we can right click on that, go to keyframe assistant, and go to easy ease in or easy ease out. Now the two that we want, we can choose either one because both of them will accomplish this, is either easy ease or easy ease in. I'm going to select easy ease in for right now. And you can see now that that keyframe has changed, and it means that we're now going to ease into this stop here. All right, the other way of applying this is the shortcut key, and you can select that layer. Now this shortcut key is F9, and it's going to apply easy ease in, and on this keyboard I'm going to have to hit the function key and F9, and now you can see that it does look a little bit differently. What it means is it's going to ease into this stop, and if we had another keyframe out here, it would ease out to that keyframe. So easy ease is going to ease in and ease out. The easy ease in is just going to ease in. All right. And so now let's go back and take a look at the animation, and you should notice a little bit of difference when those two objects stop. A little bit smoother stop there, not so hard, not so abrupt. This makes the animation look a little bit nicer, just a little more realistic. So we've gone over alpha channel, anchor point, parenting, rotation, and we've looked at easy ease. Hope all of these things help in your animations.